So if you're watching this and you followed me for some time, you're probably going to go, here he goes again. But believe it or not, with Kate at Practical Boat Owner and Theo at Yachting Monthly, regularly get emails about how good DZR ball valves are. Well, yes, they might be. And I don't understand the argument of why someone would fit a cheap fitting in a £300,000 yacht or a £100,000 yacht or even a £50,000 yacht when there's other things that I think are better available. However, what I do tend to find is, and if you look around all of these valves I've got here, and I've shown you before and before and before, hardly any of them are marked up CR. And, you know, this one's got AR on it. Well, is that corrosion resistant or not? You know, it's got a chromium finish to it. It all looks very good. You wouldn't believe how many times you turn up on boats and these things are seized. On one of the crash test boats we did at Yachting Monthly, this spigot on the top would turn beautifully, but the actual ball inside wasn't actually turning. So how do you know if it's still working or not unless you go and check it regularly when they're out of the water? But my biggest gripe with all of these things is for the cost of them against the value of the boat, it's the associated fittings. And this has been my argument for years, is why would you put something like this on your boat? Yes, the fitting itself is great, it's nice and chunky, but when you've got skin fittings and hose tails like this, which are just constantly failing because they're not of the same quality. And if you look in here, you can actually see the failure of the brass alloy there has clearly deteriorated. Now this one here, I feel like trying to shame the builder, but it was a French builder. This is a valve that I took off a boat at 4.5 years old when the hose tail snapped. And the guy selling the boat was like, oh, you're going to go on and on about the seacocks. And I said, yeah, because I've had so many insurance claims. But look at that valve and that hose tail. Look how thin the wall is on that fitting. And again, you can see the deterioration of it. But again, all of these are seized. And, you know, you look at them and think, well, people just do not exercise them. If you're going to fit these sort of things, or you've got them on your boat, do regularly exercise them. And when you leave the boat at the end of the day, unless you've got a centre cockpit or a reason why you need to leave the cockpit valves open, shut them off. Do look at these sort of things and do use them, treat them as consumables. And does size matter? Well, guess what? No, size doesn't matter, because here's a 2.5 inch valve that's been very, very kindly lent to me by the guys at Boat Folk in Portland Marine. And this has come off a very expensive motorboat. But look at the state of that valve. It's hardly ever been operated. This is actually seized solid. There is, although this was cut off, you can actually see very closely the deterioration of the skin fitting there. But more importantly, this hose tail is the biggest and most worrying thing about the whole job. For a start, when you look at the depth of the ridges in that casting, yeah, you can see they're a good 3 or 4 mil deep, yeah. But then you come to the end here, and obviously this has failed. And you can hear how tinny it sounds, which is a good indication that things are going wrong. But look how thin the walls of this hose tail fitting are. You know, and I just look at that and think, why would you have a boat that's a couple 100,000 or even 50,000 or, you know, £20,000 moored on something that's less than 3 mil thick on the walls? And when you actually start looking at the ridges, you know, they are really, really thin. So my little tips are, obviously, if you're going to play with these sort of things, you've got these on your boat right now, obviously fair enough. But do think of them and treat them as consumables. Do think about taking them off at least at 5 years. Even if the valves are working beautifully and they look perfect, change the skin fittings and the hose tails at each end if you are going to keep them on board. But frankly, for the cost, I would change to something proper like the bonds. And again, these balls, these ones in here, I think are chromium plated, but it's hard to tell. And you know, I just deal with claims all the time where the boats have been sinking because these things have fallen off. So I hope that is the end of me talking about seacocks. I'm sure it won't be, but there we are. Thanks for your time.